What's up guys, and welcome to part 3 of my BMW M3 generations comparison. We've already driven the E30, the E46, the F80, and that E90 right ahead of us. Now it's time to go back in time a little bit and try out this E36. This is a 1999 model year, and being a US car, it means it has the S52 engine that's been tuned to just 240 horsepower with 236 pound-feet of torque. The Euro E36 either came with 282 horsepower or 316. This car weighs about 3,200 pounds. It has hydraulically assisted rack and pinion steering. Let's see how this thing drives. I've only ever driven 2 examples of this in the past, and both were quite heavily modified, so this stock example should be pretty dang fun. 5-speed manual. The clutch grabs right off the ground. First impressions of the interior, very 90s. Not the best build quality. I do think the E46 took a big step forward in that regard. And even in terms of exterior styling, this is a much more boxy design. Closer, I would say, to an E30 than to the E46, which is a lot sleeker. Surprisingly comfortable and refined. The steering does have a little bit of a dead spot just on center, but actually pretty impressive for a car from the 1990s. This really is a no-frills car when you first hop in and start driving it. It doesn't feel like a high-performance car at all, if I'm being honest. It just feels like a normal 3 Series. This example has over 138,000 miles, but it still feels really fresh. Even the suspension doesn't feel tired like you'd expect for this mileage and age of car. But what happens when we start pushing it? Down into 4th, 3rd. Very smooth, straight 6 engine. Particularly powerful with just 240 horsepower, but the nice thing is very linear torque curve, and it'll rev out to almost 7 happily. It's not as exciting as the S54 and the E36 M3. That is the full Fat M engine. We didn't get a detuned version of that here in the States. Silky smooth engine response, and the steering, while a little bit sloppy feeling, it still has pretty good feedback about what the front tires are doing. But overall, the car feels a little bit lazier in its response compared to the E46, this car's successor. Doesn't have that frenetic top-end feel of either the E46 or the E90, and it feels like it makes at most half as much power as that F80 M3 competition. So it's interesting, compared to all the later generations of M3, this feels way less potent in a straight line, but the chassis balance is pretty much spot on. This and the E46 are both up there. They still feel relatively light and nimble and tossable and not overly sensitive to inputs. The E90, I would argue, starts to move away a little bit from that sort of feeling and starts to get into that territory that the F80 is firmly in, which is very sensitive to driver inputs, overly touchy in every way, basically. Here's the thing, even this US spec E36 M3 doesn't feel slow, it just doesn't feel like it wants to kill you with its speed. It's still overall a pretty well-balanced package. Nothing about this car in stock form really stands out. The steering, the brakes, the suspension, the engine, none of it is the best of all the M3 generations. And yet, I'm still having a really good time with this car because it doesn't have any real weaknesses either. So this is sort of that middle ground M3, where if you want everything to feel good, but not necessarily great, whereas most of the other M3 generations do have a sort of a glaring weakness. In the case of the E30, well, it's the fact that it feels super old, and the engine is this buzzy little thing, which you might not be a fan of if you're used to BMW straight sixes. Then you go on to the E46, and well, that car is basically perfect outside of slightly numb and light steering. The E90, on the other hand, fantastic engine, really good chassis as well, but you just sit a little too high up. The car feels a little bit heavier than its predecessors, and you could argue, not that I will, but you could argue that it feels a little oversensitive in how it reacts to driver inputs. Then you go to the F80, and that thing's just, well, it's a bit of a mess, to be honest. It's the least sure-footed of all the generations up to that point. So we'll have to get into that G80 M3 and see if the latest M3 generation corrected some of the wrongs of the F80. But for right now, I'm really enjoying just the well-balanced nature of this E36. It's the jack of all trades. The nice thing is, because it's a bit down on power, you can actually enjoy more of the performance it has to offer. But with that said, let's finish up this drive, hop into the G80, and wrap up what has been a very enjoyable video to film. All right, last but not least, we are in the G80 M3. This is the 2023 model year 50 Yara, or 50th anniversary edition, and it's finished in this gorgeous color, Techno Violet Purple. This has got to be the best color that I've ever seen on any car. But mechanically speaking, the 50 Yara is actually the same as an M3 competition xDrive, meaning all-wheel drive. We can put it into two-wheel drive mode. This does have the full power version of the S58 engine. It's a 3-liter twin turbocharged straight six, pushing out 503 horsepower, 479 pound-feet of torque. That's well over double the power figure of the E36 M3 that we just hopped out of. This car is heavy though, at 3,900 plus pounds, and we have an 8-speed ZF automatic transmission. I'm especially interested in seeing how this compares to the F80. Very nice 50 Yara badge here, 1 of 500. Tons of technology in the G80 that takes some getting used to. We're gonna put it into the owner Katie's M2 mode, and then we're gonna force the brakes into sport. Sport for the M display, we can go into 4-wheel drive sport to send a little bit more power to that rear axle. All right, and away we go. Maximum shift speed setting for the ZF 8-speed. Can this latest G80 M3 competition be the best M3 of them all? It's taken all day to get to this point. Well, it's no surprise that this is the most comfortable and easy to drive of all the generations of M3. The transmission is very smooth around town. It's smoother than the DCT of the last two generations, the E90 and the F80. Of course, this weighs almost as much as some of those previous generation M5s at 3,900 plus pounds. Oh my word, this thing is rapid. It makes all the other generations feel like they're standing still. The amount of torque that this S58 provides, even at low RPM, that's outrageous. Oh my god. This doesn't even feel like an M3 anymore. Even in 5th gear, from 3,500 RPMs, this thing pulls like a freight train. 4th gear. Wow. The steering though is so quick. Feels almost too quick. The engine sound is a little bit synthetic as well, but I do think it sounds a little bit better than the S55 and the F80. Wow, in 4-wheel drive sport mode, this thing really does feel rear biased. The car just wants to turn using the help of that rear axle. Let's dial it back into sport for the suspension. Sport Plus has really good damping quality actually. It's much better than the F80's suspension feel, but still just slightly overdamped for this road. A little bit better in sport. makes the F80 feel slow, and that's no small accomplishment. Calling this an M3, it just doesn't sit well with me. This feels like a supercar with 4 doors. This is just a whole new universe of performance. Oh, the sheer capabilities of this G80 platform, and the stability as well. You can hit crazy speeds and still have full confidence. And even though this thing weighs 3,900 pounds, it really doesn't feel that heavy. This weighs as much as an E36 M3 almost. You would never guess that. I'm driving these 2 cars back to back. Wow, the 4-wheel drive just hooks up and goes. And this transmission, in this application, in the G80, it feels really quick. It doesn't feel quite as maybe snappy as that 7-speed DCT in the F80 and E90, but the shift speed itself probably is around the same, and you get the added benefit of the smoothness. Now let's talk about subjectively how this car feels compared to the other generations. Obviously, it's so much faster and more capable. I gotta say, it's really fun as well. It's so much more well-balanced and buttoned down compared to the F80 competition. I really think this is on a whole other level, just feeling like a cohesive package. The F80 just felt nervous. But the speeds you can carry with this car, plus the fact that it's still fun to drive, that's a rare thing to be able to pull off, but BMW has done it with the G80. They really have. I was too harsh on the G82 M3 that I reviewed a few months back. I think having it on a better road this time has really opened my eyes to just what this car really is. It's an absolute supercar with 4 doors. That's the best way to describe it. So compared to the E90 M3, this doesn't have nearly as much engine character. Obviously, it's a twin-turbo straight 6, revs out to over 7,000 RPM, but it doesn't have that egg you on kind of feeling. This makes so much power throughout the rev range that it doesn't make you feel like you have to work for that performance. And while that makes it easier to drive hard, the E90's engine, that glorious S65, still is my favorite M3 engine, hands down. The character and the fact that you really have to extract every bit of performance out of it, plus the hydraulic steering, the communicative chassis. This G80 steering is good for an EPS, and it's perhaps better than the steering in the F80, but compared to any of the older hydraulic racks, this is still a bit numb, and it's a little bit overly sensitive in terms of the steering ratio. It's just too quick. How about compared to the E36 M3? Well, this is a much bigger and heavier car. It's something like 500 pounds heavier. That being said, this does retain a lot of that beautiful front engine rear drive chassis balance that the E46 is just so brilliant at. But the E46, it still has a special place in my heart because, in my opinion, it's the first generation of M3, at least that we got here in the US, that truly offers a good blend of comfort, build quality, styling, performance, and that fun to drive factor. It has everything. It doesn't feel overpowered or underpowered. It's just right. And this G80 feels maybe not quite just right because it is just so damn powerful while being a little bit digital as well. Now, how about compared to the E36? Well, these two don't even feel like the same car at all. If the E36 is the defining M3, then this should not be called an M3. It is so much faster, so much more capable. The inputs are so much more sensitive. The only thing the two share in common, really, is the fact that they're pretty comfortable to drive when you're not going all out. And I don't even know how you would compare this G80 to the E30 generation. They're so far removed. Straight 6 twin turbo with massive power and a clever all-wheel drive system in a nearly 2-ton package versus a car that weighs sub 2,900 pounds with a buzzy little motorsport derived 4-cylinder, yeah, I guess they both can do big skids if you want them to, but that's where the similarities end for the most part. But now let's boil it down. After driving 6 M3s, which generation is the best M car and which one is the defining M3? When I hear the word M3, which car immediately jumps to mind? All of these cars have their pros and cons, and they're all really enjoyable in their own way. But for me, it's a toss-up between the E46 and the E90. Both of them are just the perfect blend of usability, build quality, styling, performance, and that fun to drive factor that an M3 is all about. When you go older than the E46, you lose a little bit too much performance and you lose the build quality aspect and the everyday drivability. And when you go older than E90, everything gets just a little bit too digital. Now that being said, between the F80 and the G80, it's G80 hands down every day. It is the far superior car in every single way. Not only the comfort and the daily drivability and the tech, but also the fun factor. This car is just way more buttoned down. But at the end of the day, it's down to the E46 and that amazing E90. So a big shout out to the owners of all these amazing cars, and a huge shout out to Steven and Mark for putting this incredible comparison together for me and Kevin from the Jabal and Cars YouTube channel. Let me know what you think about this comparison. If you've driven all generations of the M3, which one comes to mind first when you hear the words M3? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.